Hey everyone, for this installment of Find Your Film, we have Eric Holmes interviewing two filmmakers. They are the co-directing team of this new documentary called Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat. Very memorable title, Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat. I think the thing that's really disconcerting is the whole idea about no pay, because I know what that's all about. It's very hard making money these days, at least in when you're a podcaster, especially. Not just a podcaster, but in this case, can you make money if you are a volunteer firefighter? So this movie, I'm looking at this documentary. It's, quote, inspired by an original story by Peter Yoakum and takes audiences behind the lines of America's volunteer fire service community. It's a tribute to the nearly 700,000 volunteer firefighters around the country, and it spotlights their selfless bravery, compassion, motivation, and unfaltering sense of community. Now, truth to tell, I have not seen this documentary. I know Eric Holmes gave it a very good review a couple of weeks ago on Cinematics. It's currently out now on digital platforms, so you can actually go to their website and find, I believe Vimeo is one of the platforms it's available on. So go to their website, check out a couple of their platforms, which it's available. And if you're interested in seeing several lives of these volunteer firefighters and seeing the hard work they do in respective fashion, check it out. Maybe this documentary will spur you on to actually check out Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat. Now, Find Your Film, it's weird because I've been trying to unlock this. Bruce, Perky, and Eric Holmes and I, we do the Cinematics podcast every week. We spotlight the new movies that are coming out on a given week. Sometimes we'll do a couple of recommendations. Bruce has his What's in the Box pick. This is all for the Cinematics universe. A lot of it is current. And like most of my life, a lot of these movies are assigned to us, or assigned to me and Eric especially, because we have to do the interviews. So a lot of the movies I cover on a given week are pretty much new movies that are coming out that are assigned to us for interviews. Now for the Find Your Film feed, yes, this is an interview, but what's great is at the end, Eric will ask questions about what to put in the box, the Bruce Perky's What's in the Box segment for Cinematics. So, and if you guys don't know what that is, it's a segment where people, filmmakers, actors, members of our Cinematics Facebook community will suggest movies for Bruce to put in his box. It's a literal box, and he'll write it down on a scrap of paper. Every episode of Cinematics at the end, he'll pick a movie from the box, and whatever that movie that is, he'll review it the following week. So that's really cool. It's a rotating segment on, well, it's not just rotating. It's a rotating selection every week, but it's a weekly segment on Cinematics. And what's cool about that is it, like Bruce said last week on the episode on Cinematics, it forces him to watch movies that otherwise he wouldn't get to. And for me, I rarely do that. I rarely participate in the What's in the Box segment with Eric and Bruce. But what's cool is I think for this Find Your Film feed, this will get me to start doing that myself as well. Because on this end, we have the interview right now with these filmmakers, Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat. That's the front center stage movie documentary we're spotlighting for this installment. But at the tail end, you guys hopefully will have several other movies along with this movie to possibly check out. So these are the movies that we're going to check out, or maybe some good movie selections, movie recommendations for you. So first off, Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat. Again, the interview's coming up. That's the first recommendation from Eric Holmes. He gave it a good review, and obviously the directors love their own film. So listen to that interview and make your decision whether or not to get it. Now, let's see. There's the filmmaker Gary Matoso. His movie recommendation is The Sparks Brothers, a documentary on, yes, the Sparks Brothers, directed by Edgar Wright. I believe it might be streaming somewhere. I'll put Just Watch links for these movies for you guys to check out these movies. So the second recommendation is The Sparks Brothers, that documentary, and that's from Gary Matoso. Cameron Zohoori recommended this documentary. I remember when it came out, it got a lot of heat for about maybe several weeks. And then I don't know, maybe it just died down, or maybe I just did not pay attention to it. It's a documentary called All That Breathes. So these are 3 recommendations for you to have. So Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat. Second one is the Sparks Brothers. Third one is All That Breathes. I have a fourth one given to me by Joseph Bridges from our Cinematics Facebook group community. If you are into Facebook or Meta or whatever they call it, or you just want to be part of a community that gives daily movie recommendations, highly recommend joining our group. Not just because it promotes Cinematics and Find Your Film in the podcast, none of that stuff, okay? That was why we created the group, but I think the best thing about our Cinematics Facebook group is we have some really great participants who recommend movies for other people to see. So it's a great value-added Facebook group, and they're not like me. They're not trying to sell you things. They're not glad-handing people. They're just giving pure recommendations. So our fourth recommendation for this installment is a movie called, I'm looking it up right now, I believe it's called The Hidden Room. I'm going down. This director's name is Edward Dmytryk, and he's a filmmaker that I really love, and I'm going to get into him down the line. I'm going to talk about him on this Find Your Film feed a lot more. But first of all, this is a recommendation. It's not oh yes, The Hidden Room. It's released in 1949. It's currently available on Tubi if you want to check it out. And I believe it's available on YouTube as well. You know, YouTube has all these movies that you can actually stream for free. I don't know how you feel about that, but sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes I will do that. If it's available on YouTube, I'll check it out. But a lot of times I'll either pay for it or if it's not on my streaming service, I just won't. I learned from Eric Holmes, sometimes he won't watch a movie on YouTube if it's maybe pirated or maybe there might be a suspect way it's out on YouTube and those people who made the movie aren't getting their... Anyways, it's a whole rigmarole. But The Hidden Room is available on Tubi, and it's directed by Edward Dmytryk, and it's got some really good reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. I believe it's in the high 80s, 80% from the audience. And it's a film noir from 1949. So I'll put all of those 4 movie recommendations for Find Your Film at the bottom of our show notes. And yeah, hopefully that'll give you some movies to watch. If you have any movie recommendations that you would like to give us as well, please email me at info@findyourfilms.com, and I will read out some of these recommendations on the next podcast episode. I'm trying to build a bigger community, not just cinematics, but just a different kind of community where, yes, cinematics is part and Find Your Film are sort of one and the same in many ways, but Find Your Film, hopefully I'm going to start building up a real archive base of different people recommending movies, and maybe whether you're going through the podcast or our website, findyourfilms.com, you can use the website or the podcast feed to find movies, hidden gems that you might not have come across. The reason why I put The Hidden Room, which sounds really weird because I did not do these interviews with the filmmakers, Eric Holmes did. This was just something that really struck my fancy because I love movies from the 40s and 50s, especially if they're film noirs. And Cinematics Facebook group member Joseph Bridges recommended it and he posted it, I think, early last night. And when the name Edward Dmytryk came up, my eyes just really, got 3 times bigger because I have one of his books. It's on filmmaking. Eventually, I'm going to read that. And Dmytryk has done some really interesting films: Raintree County, Crossfire, one of my favorites from Gregory Peck called Mirage. So I'll give you guys an update on how I feel about The Hidden Room. If you have seen the Sparks Brothers, if you see All That Breathes, or you check out Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat, would love to hear your thoughts on any of these kind of movies or whatever movies. Again, hit me up on the emails or join us on the group, and just so we can talk on a daily basis. All right, take care, guys. So anyways, that's a long intro. I apologize for that. Here is Eric Holmes' interview with filmmakers Gary Matoso and Cameron Zohoori for Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat. Again, check out their website and screening information and TVOD information. And I'm blabbing. Here's the interview. Bye, guys.
I'm here with the directors of Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat, Gary Matoso and Cameron Zohoori. This is basically a documentary about volunteer firefighters. And you guys worked with John Deere, which is strange from my point of view because I didn't know that John Deere made movies. But this is this kind of very informative documentary. What got you guys into this?
Actually, it started with our executive producer, a guy named Peter Yoakum, who was just kind of recently retired and traveling around the country and just kind of just looking for positive stories to tell, and became deeply interested in the volunteer fire service and through those travels, and spoke to a lot of chiefs and firefighters, did a lot of interviews, and just became convinced that it was a story that was important to tell, that people weren't aware of the role of the volunteer fire service in the country. The volunteer fire, many departments around the country need support in terms of recruitment and just, and funding. So Peter, had this, idea that there should be a film or something that goes out there to raise that awareness. And then he contacted us to help put some shape to it and make the film.
And one of the things I like that you guys captured in this is the training process, because I watch a lot of action movies, so it's like you got 60 seconds, click. You didn't do it, you'll never be a firefighter. But that's not how these people operate. They're like, hey, look, you didn't make it in 60 seconds. We're going to do it till you do, and it's going to be fine. And I love how supportive everyone is, probably because, like you said, that they need the help, and they need to encourage people as much as they can. Did you get a lot of that from, I assume you got a lot of that from everyone that you were filming?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the thing with volunteer firefighters versus paid firefighters is they have to do all the same stuff. It's all, the fire doesn't care, as they told us, whether it's a volunteer firefighter or a paid firefighter. When it shows up, the fire does the same thing. So the training, it's equivalent, whether they're volunteer, whether they're paid. And there's a lot of it, there's a lot that you have to learn. It's not just fires, it's rescue, it's, EMS, it's all kinds of emergencies that happen, disaster response. And just like little problems, they describe themselves as problem solvers all the time, because you never know what someone's going to call 911 for. So there was certainly, there's a lot you have to learn to be a firefighter, but there's also lots of different roles for different people to play. And that was something they always emphasized to us in talking to firefighters, was anyone can do this, anyone can be a part of it. Yes, there are those, the training you have to go through if you're going to be that firefighter going in and fighting the fire, but there's all these support roles that they need help with. There's all kinds of, IT supports needed. They need PR. They need, fundraising. They need people who are good at logistics. So there are roles for everyone, even if you're not going to be that person who learns how to put on the suit in under a minute and, grab the hose and go into the burning building.
Yeah, that was actually illustrated really well with Yitzi's character. He had the beard that he couldn't shave. And it's like, well, you know what? Maybe we can use you in other places. I love the, kind of like you say, the problem solving. It's like, look, you can't do this because it's not safe, because the mask won't seal. But that doesn't mean you don't have value. And I think that's a theme that kind of permeates throughout the entire documentary.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that's a great story, and we also think that story is representative of just, with fire departments that are struggling around the country, to really, in terms of their recruitment, to look around at their communities and kind of see who's out there and who wants to be a firefighter. I mean, Yitzi wanted to be a firefighter in the worst way. Problem was there were some barriers for him to be able to do that. But, I think that department saw the opportunity of reaching out to that community and, changing some of their bylaws in order to make that happen, and, make him and the rest of the Hasidic community kind of welcome at that department. And I think, that can carry over to lots of different types of communities and different departments around the country, where they, if they're struggling, they can kind of look to, who's out there in the community who's probably ready and would love to participate. They just kind of need to feel like there's a spot for them. And I think there's a spot for everybody in the volunteer fire service.
What were some challenges you guys had? Because I see this is like your first feature. Gary, you did a Lumiere's video, and Cameron, you did a short. Which, by the way, maybe then point us to the short and the video so we can watch those. But you guys don't have an extensive IMDb credit, but you kind of nailed it on this one. It's first time out. What were some of the challenges doing this, and also what's kind of your background? Because I'm assuming the IMDb credits doesn't encompass all of what you've done so far.
Sure. Yeah. We have a background. So we've been working together for about 8 years or so, and we do a lot of short form storytelling, documentary based storytelling, but often for clients in more commercial setting, but it's always with that, documentary mindset and documentary storytelling at the core of it. Gary has a long history as a photojournalist, did that for years before starting to do this work. I did, as you said, a short and some other, short form documentary storytelling. That's more of my background. But this was our first feature. And so there was certainly a lot to learn along the way. The scale of it was something that we had never done before. And that really started with the stories and finding the stories. I mean, when we first got our heads around what is the volunteer fire service, we put out a call for stories, and our casting director, Louise Collette, really kind of led the charge on that, and got back like 800 submissions of stories in a couple weeks of just, across the country, all sorts of different people, all sorts of different stories and situations. So the scale of it was something that we had to kind of wrap our heads around and figure out, how do we, 90 minutes is a lot of time compared to some of the other projects we'd worked on before, but it's really not a lot of time when you're talking about, the scope of these stories and the variety that was out there. And so that's when we had to kind of sit down and think about how many stories are we going to tell? How are we going to weave these together? How do we show the diverse range of stories, but also tell a coherent story that, people will be engaged by and surprised by and compelled by. So that was, it was certainly a challenge, but it was a lot of fun too.
Yeah. Also, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, so it was good seeing Eastern Nebraska represented in here.
Excellent.
Where are you guys from? Are you from that area, or like you said, that was just one of the places that called out?
That was
Go
ahead.
I was going to say, we're based out of Seattle area.
Okay.
Cam's originally from North Carolina and various places, and I from the Bay Area originally myself. So yeah, so Nebraska was a fun story to do, and that really kicked off a big run of stories that we shot kind of back to back to back. And but it was that was a fun one.
Yeah. How much time did it take to shoot this? Like, because usually documentaries can go anywhere from like, a couple of months. You get the story, get in and get out, and you can have documentaries take nearly a decade just because there's so much story and you're following around people for so long. How long did this take?
Yeah, this was a pretty tight production. Given just the whole nature of the project, we had a schedule, and we wanted to keep things on budget and just keep the production tight. So I think it was, the exact number of days of shooting, Cam? I mean, it's
probably around 35 or 40 shooting days spread out over
like 3 months. Yeah, I'd say a 3-month period of shooting. Yeah, so it was pretty contained. So we spent about 4 days in most of the locations. I would say the Washington State Training Academy story, which is revisited throughout the film. That's something we kind of kept going back to over time. When we could get there to get that. So yeah, it was. I think we were happy in terms of the going back to your original question about shooting a feature, our first feature, on the production side, again, we have kind of the experience of organizing productions, and it really wasn't that much different as you start thinking about them as individual stories. And so I felt like that part of it was, might have been maybe the easier part of the thing, but I think it was the post-production and just, 300 hours of footage and just making it make it sense was probably the bigger challenge.
Also, like, I'm guessing you guys didn't have much pushback as far as were there any barriers for you guys as far as like, oh, you can't shoot this, you can shoot this or that, or the documentary doesn't seem like that kind of documentary where people would be guarded in a way that they would be if it was like, oh, we're doing a documentary about drug addiction. Well, it's a little too personal. Don't come in like that. But was there any sort of like you guys couldn't go into certain areas, or you had to stay back at other times, or anything like that?
Very little, I'd say, across the board. People were, generally very happy to share their stories, and it's a vulnerable thing for the individual firefighters to do that, to let us into their homes often and share their stories. But they were, I think, happy that we were making the film. They knew what the impact goals were of the film. They knew that they were contributing to something that was for the benefit of the volunteer fire service at the end of the day, and was sharing stories that really haven't been told. And I think that there was, just a sense of enthusiasm around that from pretty much everywhere we went. In the case of the Muncie story that you're mentioning, I mean, that one took a little extra care because that ultra Orthodox community has had a lot of different depictions over the years. Some more positive, some less positive. And so that was one where we, took it really slow, made sure that we were talking to the right people, that everyone understood why we were there and what the goals of the project were. So we did have to, take it a little slower with that one, and make sure we were approaching it thoughtfully. But at the end of the day, everyone was very helpful and supportive. And firefighters are, some of the best subjects to work with, because they're just so resourceful and adaptable, and they get things done. They were some of the best subjects that we've worked with, I think.
Yeah, and they're like, pretty much, I mean, my personal opinion, anyone in government, they're the ones that are the most altruistic, because they're only there to help. Whereas like, military and police and like there's politicians 1,000%, like, but they all get paid. The firefighters, the ones that help, even when they're not fighting fires or helping dig animals out of swimming pools, stuff like that. Like that, there's just, how can you say a bad thing about a firefighter? You can't. They're the best of us, I think. So
it is. That's just a great way to put it. And we kind of talk about them as being extreme volunteers, that, a lot of people volunteer their time, and that's great. And I think any kind of volunteerism is awesome. But these people, their commitment that they put into this in terms of their time, just, for being available for calls, the training, that Cam was talking about before is really extensive, what they have to go through. And then, they're putting themselves in dangerous situations and traumatic situations, that they've got to deal with. And, all of that for, really little or no money, most of the time. And it's true, I think they believe that as well. I think they were doing this because it's the right thing to do. And, and I think they're an amazing group of people.
I wonder. Sorry.
I was just going to say, to your point about it's sort of the least controversial group of people in a way, right? That we all kind of, when you call 911, when there's an emergency happening, a fire, or, a grandparent who's fallen or something like that, like all you care about in that moment is that there's someone there to help you. And that was, I think, one of the amazing things with this project was how, politics never came into it, people's backgrounds, whatever it was, it is such a unifying thing. It's a need that we all have, that all these communities need. And it was kind of amazing to be traveling to so many different parts of the country and hearing that same message. And, there's none of the divisiveness around this topic that you can find, so easily on just about every other topic these days. So it was really, that was another goal of the film, I think, was just to share. Again, it's 700,000 people who are involved in the volunteer fire service. It's a huge chunk of our country who are doing this so selflessly. And it's important we think it's important to share those stories that can, bring people together too.
Yeah. As much as I think it's important to pay people to is a way to show value, and so they can live and so they can do their job. I wonder sometimes if like a volunteer, maybe brings out the people that want to do it the most. For example, like if you're doing art and you're not getting paid for it, you're doing it because you love it. Yitzy's a great example, not getting paid to be a firefighter. He just really wants to, he's really passionate about it. He really wants to do it. So hell, bring him on in. Whereas like if it's a high paying job, you're going to get, people are going to see dollar signs that might not have that same passion that Yitzy does.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of career firefighters who are super passionate about what they do, and we met a lot throughout our whole process. And but that said, I think you're right. The fact that these volunteers are, like I say, they're committing so much of their time and their lives into this, that there's just another level of commitment and passion and purpose, I think, for a lot of them that they get out of it. Yeah,
yeah,
and what's a range of people and skills, I think, that come to it too. I think that and creativity in solving these problems. Like that was something that some of the volunteers mentioned, was just, sure, it'd be great to be paid for this, but in a lot of cases in smaller communities, when they do have a paid department, it's not as nearby. They're getting, basic services. They do the job, they get it done, but you're not having necessarily that, homegrown community that understands the community and is taking care of it and knows what the needs are, is able to, in the case with the cows and swimming pools, right? Like they realized that was something their community needed. And so they figured out how to solve that problem and how to become experts at that. And that's something that I think volunteers are also really proud of, is how they are, they're part of that community that they're helping, and they respond directly to the needs because it's people they know and it's the community that they know.
Yeah. One last thing I'd add to that too is that, a lot of people one of the things we wanted to focus on were the different motivations people had for joining the volunteer fire service. And, for some people, it is a path to a career, and it's an opportunity to get free training and to learn, see if it's something that they have aptitude for, if they can handle seeing blood or dealing with traumatic situations. So, I think lots of people do it for different reasons. I mean, usually it comes from a sense of service and, and helping your neighbor, but sometimes it's family tradition. My father was a firefighter. My grandfather was a firefighter. There's all kinds of reasons people join the volunteer fire service. And so that was another theme a variety of themes we wanted to come through the film, like why people do this.
What are some things you maybe learned while making this documentary, or what are some things that you shot that was like, that just we can't, it's a cool story, but it doesn't really fit in what we're doing with the documentary? Is there anything that kind of made its way on the cutting room floor, or maybe something that just didn't get shot at all that you just kind of came across while making this?
I mean, there are so many stories, that we didn't shoot. I mean, I think as an example of one that was just a great story with one of the featured firefighters of the Hernandez family in Beeville, Jaime, who's that is that multi-generational story, whereas Jaime, who started as a firefighter, and his sons are doing it, his grandson's interested in it, his wife's involved. But there's actually a pretty incredible story where he had, within the last couple of years, a Mayday call where he almost didn't make it out of a fire. The floor collapsed beneath him, and he was stuck. And actually, it was his son and another firefighter were the ones who were there and were able to pull him out and save his life, essentially, in that moment, which was, obviously, again, huge, just in that sense of the family bonds and what it means to kind of work with your family in a way like that. And the stakes of these things, is people putting their lives on the line for their neighbors, for strangers, whoever it is. So that was a pretty incredible story, but we didn't have the visuals to tell it. There wasn't of course, his helmet cam didn't work that day. He got the helmet cam working right after they pulled him out, I think. So there wasn't any footage of it, and there wasn't, we didn't feel like we were able to tell it in a way that would have been impactful. And there were so many other parts of that story we wanted to focus on. But it was constantly things like that. The training story, again, we revisited it several times, but there were so many just fun situations and interesting things they had to go through that we weren't able to include.
Yeah, I suppose a helmet cam, especially going into the fire, would probably be mostly black anyway with all the smoke, I imagine.
What was that?
Oh, I'd say with the helmet cam going into a fire, it would just be a black screen. So just put up a black screen and
there you go. Yeah,
you're gonna fake it. Yeah.
So, but do you guys have anything else on because I really enjoyed this and look forward to more stuff that you guys do. Do you have anything else in the horizon or in the I guess with the writer's strike and the actor's strike, that's kind of tough to do. But do you guys got anything coming up in the future?
I think we've just been focusing so hard on getting this film done and getting it out to the world. That's kind of been our, that's been our main focus. We've got a couple other doc projects that are been in development. They are the longer term ones that you were talking about earlier that we've been working on for years, and we'll probably be revisiting those. But I do think that this has been an amazing experience, and we're looking forward to whatever the next project is, for sure.
Well, I did mention earlier that Gary, you did the Lumiere's video, and Cameron, you did a short. Can you tell us where we can find those? Because I would definitely like to check those out.
Yeah. So our website is storyiseverything.com. Vignette Creative is the company. So if you go to that website, you can find a lot of our other work there. Some of those older pieces, shorts, and different things that we've done. And then for this film, oddhoursfilm.com. We'll get you all the information on upcoming screenings. They're doing hundreds of community-based screenings across the country with fire departments in local communities to help with recruitment. So those are all actively ongoing now. And then also on social media, it's Odd Hours Film for all of the film updates.
All right. And also, I guess, what's the difference between Because you would think a documentary short would be easier because it's shorter, but from my perspective, I think it'd be harder because you have so much story that maybe you want to tell, but you got like 5, 10, 15 minutes, however long it is. Whereas feature length, you got more room to breathe. You got more story to tell. What are some of the difference between and some of the challenges of doing a short as opposed to a feature length?
Cam always says shorter is harder.
Shorter is harder. Yeah. You're not wrong about that. Like in general, as a rule, shorter is harder. If you've got a given story and you have to get it down to a specific length or, a certain range, like that's, it takes longer to make short things sometimes. But I would say, having done this feature now, that, they're different stories are suited to different lengths. And that's what we're kind of always trying to do, is just pay attention to the story at hand and not force it to be a certain length, but kind of see. We weren't sure at the beginning of this project whether this would be more in that short form category or it would be a feature. But it became clear because of, as we said, just the diversity of things we were finding, that we really wanted to do this at a feature length. But the challenge of a feature length is that, you have to create a narrative arc and create some momentum that carries people through the whole film and keeps their attention for 90 minutes. It's a lot easier, at 20 or 30 minutes to do one thing and do it well and tell a simple story in a short way. At 90 minutes, there's a lot more just structural things to think about and what's the emotional arc of the film. So that was certainly something we were learning a lot about as we were, especially in the editing phase of this project, figuring out, how do we weave all these things together in a way where you keep people's attention and keep their interest and have those twists and turns that we experienced and, include those moments in a way that feels seamless and keeps people's attention throughout.
Yeah. And Gary, we kind of breezed by it, but you used to be a photojournalist. But what can you say about that? Like, do you work for like a newspaper or magazine, or how did that work?
Yeah, I worked for an agency. It was called Contact Press, still is called Contact Press Images. I was based out of Paris at the time and then kind of traveled all over the world from there. That was where I was based at. But yeah, that was kind of where I kind of cut my teeth in terms of just, I'd done a lot of photography before that, but in terms of learning how to tell stories and structure stories and, just create, work with people and get them to trust you. And, everything that we kind of use today was we're working on this project or other projects that we work on, that was really kind of my formative years. And I think, there's an aesthetic for, at least for me and for photojournalism, kind of aesthetic in terms of that's photographic. And I guess it translates to cinematic, that's, I think, been a big part of our just general style and, approach the way that we shoot things. So even though we're doing motion, I think there's a kind of a photographic sense to our quality to the work that we do, and I think we were pretty happy with the way this film, ended up looking as well.
And we literally just talked about feature length versus short. You got the shortest of them all. You get one frame to tell the story.
Well, sometimes, like Cam said, it's all what's the best way to tell the story. And honestly, sometimes it is a single image can be more powerful than a video clip. And I do think, I can forget my little soapbox. I do think photography is kind of undervalued in our world today. There's just so much of it that, and unfortunately, there aren't the magazines out there to kind of support photojournalism the way that, it used to be. Magazines would run a 10 picture photo story, and that just doesn't happen anymore, which is just too bad because I think it is a great way to tell a story.
Yeah. Did you have any photos that you took that you're particularly proud of? Like, I really captured that thing right there. Any ones that kind of stand out for you?
Well, no Pulitzer Prize winning shots. I mean, I don't have one that comes to mind.
Because they're all great. I got you.
Because they're all great. Exactly.
I can say you can't.
No, but I love photography. Yeah.
All right. Well, so my co-host, I guess we'll just end on this. My co-host, Bruce, we have a What's in the Box segment. And in the box, we have people, we like to put movies in the box, movies that are underseen, maybe something. It's actually some people put it in movies that a lot of people seen, but it's just really personal to them. But that you think more people should talk about and you would like more people to see. Do each of you have a movie you would like to put in that box for us to watch at a later date?
Besides Odd Hours? No pay.
Oh yeah, odd hours, no pay, cool hats, automatic. But we're talking about like a movie. Usually it's like man, I really love this movie and no one talks about it. It's so good. I wish more people would watch it.
I've got another doc actually that in some ways shares some themes with ours, and that's about volunteers stepping up. But it's a doc that came out, I think, last year. It did get some attention, but I think more people need to see it, called All That Breathes. And it's about these two brothers in New Delhi, India. And they, their day job is they run a soap dispenser manufacturing facility. But in their off time, in the room right next door, they take care of all these injured birds, these black kite birds that are, injured in polluted skies and, all kinds of things in New Delhi. So they've taken care of hundreds and thousands of birds over the years. And formed a nonprofit around that. And it's just, there's a beautiful environmental message to it, but it's also just a gorgeous, gorgeous film that I think more people should see.
And of course, I'm blanking out, except I did watch a film on the plane ride back from New York. We're just in New York for the first theatrical showings of the film. And it's called The Sparks Brothers. And it's a music documentary about, I don't know if you've seen that. Have you seen that, Eric?
I didn't see the documentary, but I saw their movie they did with the directors. But yeah, I'm very aware of the Sparks Brothers. I love them.
And I knew the band, them musically, but I didn't really know their whole story. And it's just a fascinating story. It's incredibly inspirational from an artistic and creative point of view. I just actually shared with my daughter the other day, and who knows music pretty well, and she was just blown away. It's just not a band that people have a deep. It's part of the film is most people don't know that much about this band, and they've been incredibly influential. And like I say, it's just from a creative artistic perspective, a very, very inspirational film. So, the Spark Brothers,
they're a real fun band. They're like one of those there's certain bands or certain people that's not many people know them, but the ones that do really love them. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
But Gary, Cameron, again, really enjoyed this documentary and congratulations on it. You guys did a great job, and thanks for joining me. And I hope to talk to you again down the road whenever you get that next epic documentary that you're working on done.
I'll let you know. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time and interest. Yeah.
All right. Thank you much. You guys have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.